So good evening, Tewksbury. It is 6:05 PM on Thursday, February 16th, 2023. And I'd like to call this meeting of the Tewksbury Board of Health to order. First on the agenda tonight is approval of minutes from our last meeting that was held on January 19th, 2023. I believe everyone is in receipt of the draft minutes that our clerk, Melissa Braga, had put together. Do any members have any comments, questions, or suggested edits?
No changes.
Okay,
Nothing yet.
okay. I have no other changes either, so I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes of January 19th, 2023 as submitted.
I motion to approve the minutes of January 19th as submitted.
Okay, someone like to second the motion?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion's been put forth and second to approve the minutes as submitted for the meeting held on January 19th, 2023. All those in favor will signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Motion carries unanimously, 5-0. So we have nothing on for new business or old business, so we'll go over to director reports.
Alrighty. So 175 Kendall Road applied for registration to keep chickens. Pam has reviewed it and approved it. They have 12 chickens, and Ashley and Pam have both seen the setup. They're inside the garage right now, temporarily for like the winter. And once they go to move them outside in the spring, Pam will go back out and discuss best case scenario. Since all those shelters were taken down, they'll need something new. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. And then the town is transitioning to OpenGov, the new online permitting system that's expected to go live on March 6th. DPH released a new housing code that will go into effect in April as well. And that's all I have.
Can you sort of give an update on what the new platform will be online starting March 6th?
Yep, so people will apply, all their applications will be submitted online instead of paper form. And then that will come directly through email, through the system to us. We can respond to applicants right then and there, so they know what's holding them up. They can email us and ask questions as well. They can submit payment online. So it should be more user-friendly, yeah. Yep,
And will that be all departments at once will start using it, or is it a phased-in approach?
all departments,
Okay,
It's all departments, fire department, correct?
correct,
You go to building department for building permit.
correct.
Building for, so it's not one.
Mhm.
okay. Staff reports. So we're going to have a presentation on hoarding, from the hoarding task force, because hoarding has been an issue that has been dealt with both at the board level and usually at the department level if it gets to that extreme.
Mhm.
So if we could have the two folks come up and do the presentation on this?
Yeah.
So that's why I was given a quick lesson what to do.
Okay.
So before you folks start your presentation, I just have a couple of quick sort of grounding questions.
Sure.
Paula, because I was tasked by my daughter to ask these before I left today. She's a visiting nurse that works in the area, not within this town, but within this region. And really the question is sort of a generic, we know there's a hoarding task force that helps out in Tewksbury.
Mhm.
How much of what you're going to be talking about tonight is just pertaining to Tewksbury, or is there a similar program that's available in communities that surround us?
Absolutely. So I will explain this a little bit more further in the presentation. I dedicated a couple slides to this. But to answer your question, Tewksbury is part of a hoarding task resource group. And there's 9 communities that are involved, and I can go through all 9 of those during the presentation. And Tewksbury has equal say, or let's say we had a hoarding case present to us, and we needed funding for a dumpster or for a cleanup project for this home and this individual struggling. We have the ability to present this case to our hoarding resource group network, and we've secured grant funding as we applied as a group for this, and we can secure funds to help out the family in Tewksbury that's in need. So, like I said, we're equal parts of the 9 there.
Okay, and it's not just related to, for example, the elderly that have hoarding issues, but it's not age-specific?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll reserve my other questions
Okay,
till after the
awesome,
presentation.
awesome. Thank you, Ray. All right, I'm going to get started, if that's okay?
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, so we
First,
are-
if you can just introduce yourself for the record?
Yes, absolutely. So my name's Ashley Pavlakos. I'm the public health nurse here for the town of Tewksbury.
Hi, I'm Christina Hess. I'm the outreach coordinator at the Tewksbury Senior Center.
And today we're going to do a brief presentation on hoarding disorder. And what we're going to cover today in the presentation is a brief definition or slash overview of hoarding disorder, information on the multi-town resource network that we are a part of, what would a potential response look like here in Tewksbury if we were to have a case, and just kind of walk you through that. And lastly, I thought it'd be important just to talk about removing stigma surrounding hoarding disorder.
All right, so what is hoarding disorder? Hoarding disorder is present when the following criteria are met. It's a persistent difficulty discarding or parting with possessions, regardless of their actual value. It's a difficulty due to the perceived need to save the items and the distress associated with discarding them. The symptoms result in the accumulation of possessions that congest and clutter active living areas and substantially compromise their intended use. The hoarding causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. So what hoarding disorder is not? It's not laziness. It's not a lack of standards. Previously, it was thought it was a form of OCD, but it's not. It is not a recent phenomenon. The Kohler brothers in the 1940s had a place in Manhattan that was completely full of items such as magazines and various things, and even was booby-trapped. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the famous cases that is an example, but it's definitely not a recent phenomenon. And it is not fixable by a massive cleanup. So this graph shows the problems of extreme cleanouts. And while cleanouts might be necessary to preserve public safety, they can be extremely traumatizing. They can cause what we call emotional flooding. They rarely are effective or sustainable, and they can cause the same PTSD levels as a natural disaster. And if you look at the graph, it shows the progression of excessive acquiring over the years, and then you have the cleanout, and then the accumulation of possessions will then worsen right after the cleanout. So that does not help the situation. So this graph, this is what you see, what people see when they see somebody with hoarding disorder. You see the unsanitary living conditions. That's probably the first thing that you'll notice. The clutter, maybe some unpleasant odors, the acquiring of possessions, and then the saving of possessions, and the social isolation. But really underneath there's lots. There's some mental health, there's trauma, there's loss, there's memory issues, maybe a family history, lack of insight, physical health is part of it. So there's a lot that you don't see underneath.
Right. I'm going to explain to the difference today between clutter, collecting, and hoarding. So when we think of clutter, you have possessions that are disorganized and may be accumulated around living areas, but the individual has no difficulty with excessive acquisition and no major difficulties discarding those items. Collecting. So collecting, you could be collecting new items or existing items. I think of action figures that somebody might collect and display neatly on a shelf. And then hoarding, it's when possessions become unorganized piles of items, and the accumulation of these items prevents the rooms from their intended activities. And then if we go to the next slide, I have some picture examples. So we have clutter in the top left. It could be, if you have a teenager in your household, it could be their messy room that you think definitely could be neater, but it's livable. They can move stuff off the bed, they can still sleep in the bed, they can still function in that room. Here we have a collection of rubber ducks, again, displayed very nice and neat. You know what they're collecting, they take pride in that. And then here is an example of what an individual suffering from hoarding disorders house may look like. In this picture, it looks like they're hoarding magazines and newspapers, and now this room, which might have been a living room at one point, is not able to use for that function. So why is hoarding disorder so important to address? Why do we talk about it? Why is the health department overseeing this? And there are a number of good reasons for that. Homes with excessive acquiring can pose a fire risk. So fires are more likely to spread quickly, which can affect your neighbors. It can imperil the lives of firefighters or first responders who have to navigate these impassable spaces. They're at risk for items for falling on them and injuring themselves. Homes may suffer from mold growth, pest infestations, or structural damage. And again, can affect your neighbors as well. Homes are more susceptible to flooding, to sewer backup, or electrical issues. And that can obviously spill over to the neighbor's yard as well. But I want to stress this. The most important thing in our top priority is the individual who's suffering from hoarding disorder. And they can have issues in the home as well. They're more at risk to fall. They're more at risk for accidents. It poses risk to the individual and others that may be living in that household. If there's a medical emergency and EMS has to respond and they're unable to get to that person, or it causes a delay in time to get to them. The clutter, the garbage, or animal or human feces that could accumulate can cause respiratory and other health problems for the individual and the family members as well. So it's important for public health officials, for fire departments, for building departments to take action on eliminating these health and safety risks to the individual with hoarding disorder and for the neighbors and others. Here is a little slide about the multi-town hoarding disorder resource network that we had mentioned at the beginning here. So it is a group of 9 towns, 9 neighboring towns, Acton, Bedford, Billerica, Chelmsford, Dracut, Tewksbury, Townsend, Tingsboro, and Westford have all gotten together and decided to unite as a group to address this issue. Our mission statement is to destigmatize hoarding disorder and to safely keep people in their home through organized assistance, education, and providing appropriate resources. Being part of this resource group provides us opportunities for education, not only for staff members who are attending these meetings, but we can in turn teach that to the community members as well. Again, and another little thing about collaborating with our neighbors, it gives us a greater chance of grant funding. So when we apply for a grant, there's 9 of us, 9 communities that are applying for this, whatever it may be. We're more likely to get it than if we applied individually. We actually did apply this past September to a grant and did get funding, which I spoke to at the beginning as well, and that we're able to use equally if a case does come across our desk that needs our assistance. Other benefits, it's creative and collaborative problem solving, and then we can learn from each other's experiences. There may be something that we haven't experienced here in Tewksbury, but one of our neighboring towns has, and has maybe a solution to that problem, and it's a great, invaluable resource to be able to tap into that. This is a little flow chart of how a potential response could look like here. We have an individual with hoarding disorder, and you can have a couple different ways that this case could be presented. It could have been a medical call, a fire, and a police officer or a fire officer, excuse me, responded, and then they let us know. You could have a family member, a friend, or a landlord reach out to us, and we find out that way. And these are the resources. After we get notified, it trickles down the flow chart there. So we have actually 2 social workers here in town that will be willing to work, or whatever, excuse me, can work with the individual and the family to get them the help and resources they may need. So we have the Frontline Initiative social worker who services under 65, and then we have Christina Hess over here who services over 65. After that, our health director would get notified, and I would get notified as well. And together, whoever is involved on this team will kind of brainstorm and see what the next steps would be. And if you look below that, it's just additional resources that we can tap into if need be, depending, on the situation that we have at hand. And obviously, each case is handled on a unique individual basis, so it's not all the same. Lastly, I want to talk about removing stigma around hoarding disorder, and we do this by a couple different ways. By providing this important education, we can educate the public and make it more comfortable to talk about. We self-educate as well, which is very important. Having discussions like this and talking openly about hoarding disorder helps remove stigma. I like to remind everyone to be conscious of language we used and that our words really do matter, what we say to each other. And then lastly, supporting individuals who may have hoarding disorder is very important. We are actually in the process of trying to put together a support group called Buried in Treasures and offering that workshop to the public. But we're still working out the planning stages right now. And I think that is it for our presentation today. Before we have questions, I do just want to give one little plug out to this new mental health resource that we do have in Massachusetts here. It just came, I don't know what the word, it just came about, I guess, on January 3rd of this year. So it's a new program. And it's this new line called the Behavioral Health Helpline. And it's, like I said, available to all Massachusetts residents. It's 24/7, 365 days a year. They're open at any time you can call. And I put the number up there. So I think that's very important with everything going on right now, to mention. A little brief overview of what it is. The Behavioral Health Helpline connects individuals and families to a full range of treatment services for mental health and substance use that's offered in Massachusetts, which includes outpatient, urgent, and immediate crisis care. You can call the number, you can text the number, or even go on the website, and you get real-time support from a clinician who will connect you with who you need. And then one last thing I want to mention is, what can you call about? So you can call this helpline and they will help with any mental health or substance use concern. Maybe you're sad, you're anxious, you're worried about a drug or alcohol use, and even if you're not quite sure, they can still talk you through what's going on and provide you help. So I think it's an important number we all save, and you can call on behalf of a loved one too. It doesn't have to be that individual. Thank you.
No, I thank you for writing that, because unfortunately, in Massachusetts, we've had 2 recent issues of mental health issues causing much worse problems in the home setting. I've also, in my family, we've gone through 2 things recently, and one thing that I just want to educate people too on is that when you look at especially older folks, and in my case, my wife is an aunt and uncle who don't have kids, so they're it for their end of their generation. And the aunt has a lot of health issues. The husband was doing his best to take care of her, but it was just becoming overwhelming. But none of us in the family were aware of this. And so he's now being held for a psych. She's in the hospital as well, and it's one of those that I just really implore to folks that if you have elderly that are living on their own, especially if they don't have kids, so they don't have that immediate contact, it really helps to check them every so often. If you sense that there's any change, one of the questions up until this presentation was, what can we do? Who do we call? Can we notify someone? And most of the time, no one knows what to do, so what happens? Nothing gets done. And then you hear about these things in the paper and the news. So I think this is a very timely presentation so that we all know that it's not just the person who's having the issue that can reach out for help, but it can also be sort of a third party calling, just saying, we have concerns about. And that they'll be able to hopefully,
Give
and
some,
I don't know how they would do about reaching out to someone if this is more of a phone service, but
yeah, I think they try their best to connect with the individual that the person's calling about, but I do believe they provide resources and help to their fullest extent.
so I think one of the goals that we've had on the board, and we're trying to do in Tewksbury Cares as well, is trying to make people aware of resources that are out there. And for us to be sort of the dot connect is just to let people know there are some important resources out there and they go underutilized and people are not aware that they're there.
Oh, I agree.
Okay, now in terms of the hoarding,
Yes.
we have like the Nine-Town Collaborative. Do you know if that's been replicated in other areas of the state, or is this something sort of unique to these 9 towns?
As far as my knowledge, and it may be a little bit limited, I think it's unique for us right now.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, because I can tell you that my daughter covers an area north of here, and she has a lot of patients that she sees that have hoarding issues. And there it's a challenge because they can't go to live in a shelter because they then get terminated from having home care services, and they've just been freshly discharged from the hospital. So she was hoping that this was a program that was offered in other locations. So to have her work with the company to try to get those folks to come up with the collaborative, because I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I know 3 of us have been on the board long enough that we've had 2 hoarding cases come before us. One that the board actually had to issue a eviction. And that was very similar, you're talking about, that the fire department determined that they could not even bring a stretcher into the building, and it was in an apartment building, and clutter had hit the gas stove, and there had been a slight gas leak. So when you talked about it could also impact neighbors,
Others, and yeah.
that was definitely the case.
Absolutely.
And we had another one, I think about 2 years ago, that I think was a mobile home. The fire director had that, and that was gonna be my other question, is that it was not only a hoarding issue, but there was no running water. So they didn't have the ability to flush toilets. And this is not just like a 1 or 2 day thing. So I guess one of my questions is, when we talk about hoarding, at times there'll be other issues going on as well that deems the property at that point in time to become uninhabitable due to public health concerns. So more for all 3 of you, what's the criteria for an issue like that, and what drives that someone actually has to leave the house for a while so that things can be fixed? Because a lot of cases, the person's unable to afford the fixes, and there are usually a whole host of other things going on. I think this one case too, there was animals in the trailer as well, so it was just like, you check all the boxes plus some.
I'll take this one. So like the housing code, so those would be conditions deemed to endanger. So you need minimum standards to live. Water, obviously, is one of them. So that's an immediate, you can't live there. There's no means to use the sanitary facilities. A lot of people don't choose to bathe themselves, but again, water is an essential part of living. So that is definitely one of the criteria. Again, like structurally sound, which I would bring back up with me to determine that. There's other conditions as well. Hoarding, obviously, like, can't get around. There's a fire load risk within the home. If that were to catch on fire, it would go up in seconds, and there's no way for those people to get out. So that's just a couple instances, but majority of mine have been no running water along with hoarding.
Okay, so as sort of a what-if example, so a visiting nurse visits someone who has not only hoarding issue going on, but, for example, the pipes burst when we have the cold snap. So they're living there with no electricity, no running water, hoarding issue. And it's not a town employee. whom should that person first call? First, looking at the non-member communities, but then more of a general question of where should people be reaching out to?
That usually comes to us.
Yeah.
Okay, so. it would be
But
a
then
health
again, the tenant also has to give us permission to get in. So we can't go in, so say someone gets taken out by ambulance. We don't have the right to enter that home unless we have permission from the person in the hospital. So sometimes that happens with the fire department, say someone falls down, they have to take them out. It's a hoarding situation, they call me, I still can't go in. They don't own that property, that's not where they live, they can't take ownership and have us go in. But they can go in and take pictures and forward that to us, which would trigger, we saw pictures, so we know the conditions inside the home.
Okay, so in that flow chart, you had, I think, like 2 or 3 slides back. You had the police chief, you had the fire chief, and you had,
Other, which
Other.
was like landlords,
So-
family members.
is there sort of a general rule of thumb that if someone didn't watch this presentation tonight, but they have a hoarding issue, whether it's a family member coming to visit someone, realizing there are issues here that do need assistance, what would be the recommended first point of contact for that observer of this?
I definitely wouldn't say the health department, just because we're the enforcement hand, right? Unless it's a serious situation, because again, the goal is to keep people in their home. And we obviously, that's the worst part of the job, is kicking someone out of their house. So I would say more so like outreach, social workers, that's a better avenue. If they have elder services involved, which is now age span, so I believe they take care of all ages at this point, which is great, because we've always had an issue, kind of, it's more like 50 to 65, what do you do? There's not a lot of services out there, but now the age span is more inclusive of all ages. They're able to help with all scenarios.
Okay. Because I'm just concerned that if people don't know whom to contact, just like for psych emergencies, no contact's been made and the problem's not going to solve itself.
Right.
So they can call me at the senior center. So I'm not only just the outreach coordinator, I'm also a clinician. So if somebody's over the age of 60, I can work with them, I can go to the home, I can provide services, even one-on-one therapy. But if they're under 60, then that would be the frontline initiative. Their clinicians would go in and work with them.
Okay, and are all the members of the task force members of the local communities, or is there any state agencies that get involved as well?
They're local community members for
Okay.
the respected towns.
So the
Whether-
State Department of Elder Services has no part in this? Okay.
No, she works at the senior
Okay,
center. Yeah, it's
yeah.
all local.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
No, again, that helps narrow people down, so they're not contacting the state, trying to figure out what office, or
Right.
what department in the state do I call to get help? It's a local issue, so you reach out to the local folks, okay. Well, I don't want to monopolize the time. Any
Yeah.
board members have any questions?
No, I think it was a great presentation.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Is there an advocacy program for people who may be suffering from these problems? Is there a group out there that advocating for these folks to try to determine not only what their rights are, but how to balance those rights with what's necessary from a safety and health standpoint?
I don't know of any advocacy groups. I mean, lots of clinicians, because it is a mental health issue. It's diagnosable. So they work with clinicians, and it's a difficult, challenging time, but yeah, I don't know of any advocacy groups off the top of my head.
Because a lot of times people don't want to speak to professionals or people that have, let's say, a badge. And that's not
Yeah.
the badge that you flash. I'm talking about education, superior knowledge. Sometimes it's enough to send them away from treatment rather than towards treatment. And that's why I was wondering if there's an advocacy program out there that would help break down the barriers necessary to get them to speak, rather than speaking to someone who they think are there to take them out of their homes.
Right.
That's one of the problems I've run across, and I've been on both sides of this, both in the housing court, advocating for and for removal because of the seriousness. But it always seems that without an advocate on their side, the lack of communication leads to abrupt decisions on care and placements and things. So, as Ray said, there's sometimes no children involved, therefore there's not a built-in advocacy.
That's a good point.
And it would almost seem that this is the kind of program where you want to have volunteers as well as the professionals that you're putting up here that intervene in these things.
Yeah.
So that would be my suggestion, is to try to find folks that have experience in the past, maybe even have a parent or someone else to go through this, or even a child go through this. But it seems to me that those are the types of groups that should be assembled along with your group, so that they run concurrently almost
Yeah.
for assistance.
No, thank you, that's a good idea.
Thank you.
So in all cases, the person that has the hoarding issue, they have to be willing to accept help, correct?
Yeah.
And the only time they can be cleaned otherwise is if there is unfortunately an eviction notice, whether temporary or long-term, that, and you're right about that graphic, you come in, you do massive cleanup, but that's not fixing the underlying issue, that's just fixing the visible piece. That everyone can walk away saying, oh, I feel better, at least they have a more livable condition, but
It didn't address the root of the problem.
Yeah.
But I think that the key is that whether it's mental health or even medical health or hoarding, the person that's suffering has to be willing to accept the help, and that without it, legally, they can't do anything unless
Right.
you have to be forceful with an eviction order.
Even
That's-
the housing court and judges are reluctant to step into the breach here, believe me.
It's very tough.
Cases continue month after month after month with appearances, and it takes a lot of guts to try to step in and make a decision for someone who's reluctant to make a decision for themselves and who can help themselves, and there's no support group. But I've seen better action taken when there are support groups and the courts and the judges know that it isn't just that decision that's driving the next course of action, but there's a decision that has folks that are trying to effectuate it and try to implement it, whether it's PACE, emergency, all those things have to be taken into consideration, because they're not the same, none of them are the same.
Right.
So I think the more that people can be brought into the circle for help, and whether that's at the senior center level, the school level, this is where some of these things are going to have to be discussed. And my next question was, are you heading towards any of those venues? The schools, the senior centers, for this educational outreach?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. We haven't thought about the schools, reaching out there, but I'm definitely open to that, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But we were definitely interested in sharing, when we do get our group up and running, with the senior center and just honestly all community members.
Yeah.
I think that cutoff maybe would be like 18 and over, just because, it can be, it's a lot of material, and I think that would be appropriate.
I think there's actually
Yeah.
some local publications out there
Yeah.
that would probably put a support ad in the paper so that you may be able to reach some of the people that are still reading newspapers.
That's a good idea.
Because they don't all obviously participate in social media.
Yeah.
So it would seem to me some of this outreach might go towards those periodicals and those weeklies, dailies that
Yeah.
might assist you in identifying at least the people that are at risk.
It's a great idea.
So I would hope that you guys reach out in that direction as well, not just social media, because it's frankly, social media can be as dangerous as anything else out there. So I know people are inundated every day with social media, and it takes up far too much of their time as it is, but some of the people that obviously you're trying to reach still are connected to the local scene, whether that's
Yeah.
local newspapers, weeklies, and things.
Yes.
So obviously, if there was a task force created, that was done in response to an increasing amount of hoarding issues, or at least increasing awareness of hoarding issues in the town. Do you see that trend continuing, or has,
I think as we're coming out of a pandemic and more people have started to normalize getting to see each other again like they had in the past, maybe it's been brought up to, called out more just because we hadn't seen people in so long. But as far as more than before, I wouldn't say that. I would say about the same amount of cases as before
Yeah.
the pandemic.
I would agree with that. I think that the task force is a great, hoarding disorders are challenging disorder to address. And being collaborative with other towns gives us more resources, more ideas, more ways of addressing it.
I think the other thing to be really critical, if you haven't already thought of doing this, is however you can, try to document some success stories so that people know it's not just a group of people that gathered with a great idea, but we're still trying to find a place that actually helps. But I think people would be more willing to reach out for that help if they know that it has made a difference. And I'm not saying that you folks aren't making a difference, but I think it would be helpful to get out there however you can of just that it is making a difference, because then people see that positive news and they'll want to learn more.
Absolutely.
I think Ray makes a good point with one of the that can reach out of that, is that hoarding isn't related solely to people who are in their houses. Hoarding affects people in different ways. Even personally, having your space cluttered and not even owning a home or being in an apartment, these are things that are affecting people, as you mentioned, coming out of this pandemic, being affected these ways. Recognizing the symptoms early might assist and prevent the hoarding problems that we will see in the future when they do get housing, or when they do own a home, but some of these traits and characteristics, and I'm not going to say stigmas, but obviously those types of issues are raised very early, and, not that people should be tattletailing on each other, but some of these things can be recognized early, and I think if your type of outreach is educational in that regard, there's self-help out there too, because people can self-help. As long as they can recognize the problem, that maybe they do have a tendency, a predilection leading towards these directions. It would seem to me that this is a great opportunity for that type of outreach, for that type of self-diagnosis for people. The more they realize there's no stigma attached to it, the better off it is. And it's no different in my mind than weight loss. If you recognize that you have a weight problem that you're addressing, these are types of problems out there that I think have remained hidden over the last couple of years because people have been pulled back into their shells. They have less tendency to be interacting with the public, their families, many groups, their churches. They've all pulled back a lot. Now that support group that used to be able to recognize those things and help you and assist you, those are gone. And it'd be great if they were coming back, but it seems to me that this is one of those opportunities where
Definitely.
those types of things can be brought to their attention.
My final question is, we have the task force, but to your point, are you aware of any self-help groups for families that have loved ones that are hoarders that they can sort of,
Not,
No, I don't think I know anything for families off the
I
top
think
of my head.
Age Span, because Age Span has a hoarding disorder program. So that would be my contact for something like that.
Yeah, because a lot of times families are trying to figure out how the heck they
Yeah.
deal with this. And
Yeah.
as you folks are collaborating to pull best practices, I think it'd be nice to have a venue for families to be able to do the same way, because you've got to attack it from two different directions.
Right.
Or to have those families be able to reach out to
Yeah.
these self-help type groups
Yeah.
as the advocate or the
Absolutely.
breakthrough that would assist.
Mhm.
But I think you have a wonderful program, I think you have wonderful opportunities, and I think it takes these brainstorming types of groups and get-togethers and exposure to make these things really work. And to help the folks step out of the shadow, come forward and, seek help through their own groups without the threat and intimidation of having to sit in front of a group like this or a court.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So any other members have any questions?
I have a quick one. It's, how common or recurring is hoarding in Tewksbury? Have you, in the last, like, if you were to do statistic wise or numbers?
Um,
you said
I'm gonna-
average?
How many you've had, Ross?
I mean, it's hard to, I've had probably about, I've been at the senior center about 2 years now, so probably about 10 cases
Okay, yeah.
that have come to my attention. The problem is sometimes you don't know
Right.
about them until something happens, like a fall, the fire department's there, or things like that. But it's common enough and challenging enough that it's, yeah, it's
Absolutely.
a
No,
top
th-
priority.
Thank you. And if there's anything that, so with the Tewksbury Cares, if there's anything that we can do, we're still trying to obviously build that up as well. So if there's anything that we can do to support or any of the resources, that would be helpful so we can also
Absolutely.
push
Great.
through that as well.
Absolutely.
So collaborate for sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, we want to see you folks become even more successful, so we don't have to hear bad cases come before us.
Thank you.
So whatever we can do to help, we will definitely
Thank you.
try to help you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, well, thank you both for coming tonight. Thank you for the presentation. Okay. Do you want to do a Tewksbury Cares update, since that's sort of a segue?
Yeah, so the next meeting is February 27th. That's a Monday at 6 PM at the Tewksbury Police Department Training Room. Yeah.
And since I attended the January meeting, we can say that the attendance doubled at that meeting, and you're hoping the same trend
Yes,
continues?
so we're looking to double the amount of people that were there this past meeting. So the more the merrier. Everyone is welcome, all ages. And there's no discrepancy on who can come. It's just informative right now. We're still trying to build it up and get going and getting things out so that we can be more visible. So just kind of brainstorming ideas amongst the residents of Tewksbury.
Well, and I'll make one little plug. Just because a certain member is going to be stepping off the board, you're not going to be truly off the board. We're still going to look to you for
I live right-
Source of information.
You know where I live, right?
Yep, so we'll try to utilize your knowledge as long as we can, because it's been very valuable to the board.
I appreciate that.
We may even have to create an ex officio position to put you on.
Yeah.
I was telling somebody the other day, I said, I start, professionally, my job for what it is, I start the job off, and I end up pro bono, because it's like, oh, you don't do that, you gotta do this, and I leave a lot of money on the table, I'm told, so I might as well just keep doing it.
So from my knowledge, I think I started 2012, and you were already on the board when I joined, so when,
Turn me 40.
okay.
But,
Been a lot of fun years we've served together. Is one way of putting it.
and I was born in this town. I have a great slate right down the road here, I'm not going anywhere. Call me anytime you need me. I'm not shy,
And I'm serious about that. We're going to continue to use you as a resource as long as we can.
I'm right here. Bob was out to get me, he can find me even when I'm out back.
Takes a little hunting sometimes, but keep going.
Mr. Chair, I'd also like to make another announcement if
Go
okay.
right ahead.
So during last month's Board of Health meeting held on January 19th, it was announced that we would have a credible speaker from Massachusetts Safe Technology speak on the topic of wireless technology risks and safer solutions. That speaker was scheduled to appear this evening. On February 3rd, the chair of the Board of Health requested this informative session be canceled. Based on discussions I had with Mr. Chair, his decision to remove the speaker came after he was contacted by a writer of the local newspaper, the Tewksbury Carnation, on her opposition and expression of disfavor with the topic. The topic of wireless technology risks and safer solutions is directly relevant to the Tewksbury Board of Health's duty of care. It is the board's duty to provide sources that are knowledgeable in areas that may potentially be of interest in public health concerns. Discussion on this topic is timely, given that just recently there was a case in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, where an emergency cease and desist order was announced by their Board of Health due to multiple reports of illness and negative health symptoms from residents living nearby a Verizon cell tower. When I ran for the Board of Health, I committed to keep our community aware and informed with respect to health and wellness. It would then be up to you, the residents of Tewksbury, to take this information and act on it as applicable and appropriate. I was elected by the majority of the town residents for that reason. I am here for you and for keeping Tewksbury healthy and informed. While there may be topics that folks may feel do not apply to them or topics that folks may have a different opinion on, it is still my charter and commitment to keep the community aware and informed on topics that may or may not be discussed in normal course and those that may be very well impact public health, such as the risks of wireless technology and safe and alternative solutions. It is not in the best interest of the community to be deprived of information because of one individual's disfavor with the topic. The fact that one individual was able to sway the chair to have removed a credible speaker is both a shame and a loss of our community, the residents of Tewksbury. I say this because I believe that this is something that we should discuss on the Board of Health. And to have it removed from the agenda, like I said, because of one person's disfavor, is not fair for the rest of the community. This is informative. Just like hoarding, it is informative. It is good for the people to know the resources that are out there. It is good for the people to have information on things that could assist in public health and could prevent them from getting harmed, and so that they can have the information and do with it as they will. That is all.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I know I've talked, yeah,
Can I say something in support of that?
yeah.
We've had issues that group the Board of Health. And whether this incident that she's talking about has anything ultimately to do with health is unknown. And I've had discussions with Shannon about this offline. But we've had other incidences where we have a responsibility to inform the public in regards to a potential, before they start stapling these things up on telephone pole 15 feet from my bedroom window. Okay? We had the same type of situation occur when they went through the recreational marijuana thing. All of a sudden, we went to a town meeting and we voted for recreational marijuana. And so I said, well, we didn't even discuss what the potential ramifications were of having such a place in town was regarding, a 14-year-old child going in with his parents to get some pot for the weekend or whatever they do. And, I had some feedback that told me, well, the emancipation age in Massachusetts is 18. I said, yeah. I said, well, we have witness to it, yeah. I said, the next step up from a bottle of beer is something that we can deal with. The next step up from this hybrid marijuana may not be something we can salvage from a human perspective. I said, I'm not a pro on this. But I think we should have had that discussion, or we should have at least had a contrary opinion, or had people, talking about it, so that we had a public that was informed about, 66 people in the town of Tewksbury, 33,000, voting in favor of three retail marijuana places. Now we're talking about this 5G thing, whatever the hell it is, that we're gonna be putting up, that's, we see these things next to my head. I have to, my 95-year-old father's down the street, I gotta make sure I have him near me, but 3G, 4G, now 5G, is it gonna affect anything on me? Is anything gonna happen? Before they put the thing up, I'd like to know, at least have the conversation, and I don't know, but at least have the conversation like we didn't have with the marijuana incident, around what the potential might be, so that we had an informed decision about what we were doing here. When I talked to Shannon about this, and everybody has an opinion, and I respect her opinion about it. Well, the selectmen have already decided that they have a way by which they're going to, place these things in town. And I'm like, well, so I stood up, I turned around, I said, so there is an issue with health, or there's potentially an issue with health, or there may be an issue with health on these things. Why would they do that? Why not put one on every telephone pole? I think we should have a discussion, or at least stimulate some people's minds out there that they will come eventually to a library, to a session, or at least, tune in more than 4 people a night on these meetings, or maybe just bring it out so somebody, will start thinking about it before we make a decision. So that's in support of you. Okay? Thank you.
Yeah, so as Mr. Scraw and I had talked too about this, I think, and I talked to the director as well, I think having something at the library where there can be more of a free flow of conversation between attendees and the presenter is going to be most beneficial, because our meetings are not structured to have people ask questions. So it's sort of a presentation of information as opposed to a chance that people can express their opinions, whether for or against the topic. So I think it's important that we have a mechanism, and we're starting because we've not done this at the board before, of trying to have as you were saying, Mrs. Scott, a healthy debate's always good about topics and
Well, I did say that.
the venue.
A healthy debate in the right venue.
Yeah.
And I will just make it clear that I support anybody coming forward in this board that may have even an inkling that there's something out there that will affect someone's health. Then it belongs here. Conversation I had with the chairman was that this may not be the proper place for a debate. A debate between people that have biases or influences doesn't belong here, because we're here to listen, consider, and decide if necessary. That's our job. Now, if someone wants to bring an issue to the forefront, that should never be suppressed or oppressed. But there may be a better venue to have that discussion than here at the Board of Health. So we talked about a policy that might be developed so that we could bifurcate, and what I mean by that is separate, when bias, influence, and those types of things are important to people, they're important to everybody. You may have stakeholders in 5G that want to see not only on every pole, but on the bottom of the poles too. A stakeholder has a bias, a financial interest, but that doesn't belong here. What belongs here is, and I think Ms. Bragger was mentioning it, is that there are people that can educate and inform, and then they can take that to another venue and debate it, because it's our job again to listen, consider, decide. That wasn't in front of us, so I would never prevent someone from coming forward. And in all due respect to the chairman, the discussion was about having a policy in place to prevent the biases, the influence and stuff ending up here. We don't want it here. We're not a political board. We don't consider politics. We consider health, safety, and welfare. And that's what we want to stick to. So, just like the folks that appeared in front of us, it was about health, safety, and welfare. We want to keep it that way. If we need to develop a policy to bring people forward, let's do it. Let's make sure that it stays clean, it's factual, it's concise statements of fact, not opinion, not influence, not bias, not I'm for this, I'm against this. It's not a place to have a debate. Just facts. That's the only thing that really needs to come out. And I will say that I did get a chance to look at the little handout, and it's heading in the right direction. It's factual. That should be the start. So with that, I'll turn it back over.
Yep. No, I thank you for those comments as well. So, Mr. Rue, I think it's that time for you.
How are you doing as a lame duck, right?
What's that?
How are you doing as a lame duck member?
Well, we'll know after this motion.
Yeah.
I make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Okay.
I'll second it.
You?
So motion's been put forth and second to adjourn tonight's meeting. All's in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Motion carries unanimously, 5-0. It is 7:01. Good night, Tewksbury.